there are comparisons made between now and 1929. If you were, I mean, because I think overall, certainly, we've dealt with that, with the more present, with the 2008 crisis better than the one that happened obviously in the past, because I guess they didn't have any knowledge of economic crises in the past, so they didn't know what to do. But I mean, certainly we haven't had the hyperinflation. People haven't been carrying wheelbarrows to buy food and everything. I mean, if you were in the position of Obama or Gordon Brown or whomever, what action would you have taken in that crisis? Because nothing surely would have led to a repeat of 1929, no?
Well, I don't think you can have a repeat of 1929 because the economy is so different now. In 1929, people made things in the West. The economy now, I mean, money was a real thing, I think. But I'm wondering, I don't know if there was a gold standard in 1929. Possibly not. Certainly after the war, Bretton Woods, the gold standard was reinstituted. And this period of time from 1971 on, is a time where everything changed. So between the war and this, now the 1929 crisis came at the end of a period of extreme inequality of wealth. That's the similarity to now.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the economy was so financialized. I mean, it was manufacturing in a sense that got America, well, it was the war, but war manufacturing, but it was what got America out of the Depression was the New Deal, creating works programs for people and the government, rather than the government saying, let's bail out the banks. Don't forget, the thing about FDR was he very tightly controlled the banks. He didn't allow the banks to have any part. He said, now I'm going to control you. You're not going to participate in this. This money's not going to you. This money's going to create jobs for people. And that could happen now. That could have happened in 2008. That crisis of mortgages could have been solved better, I would say, if that money was paid off all those bad mortgages. Then the banks wouldn't have had any bad mortgages on their books and everything would have been perfect. Yeah. I mean, the whole crisis would have been solved. People would have been in their homes and their mortgages would have been paid and the banks would have been rescued. But that's not what they did. And the reason they didn't do it is for this. It's not just inequality of wealth. It's inequality of treatment. It's inequality of worth. People who are rich are considered better than people who are poor. I told the story about Jon Stewart having spoken to Timothy Geithner, and he related this story on one of his, I don't know, on a podcast or something, where he said, I spoke to Timothy Geithner, and I said to him, why didn't you bail out those mortgage holders? And that's what Obama was saying when he was running. And Timothy Geithner said, well, we couldn't do that. That's a moral hazard. We didn't want to encourage people to take bad loans and, do things, get themselves into trouble. Then they just wouldn't, they keep doing it. So this is what they're talking about, loans that were targeted at poor, mainly Black and Hispanic communities, and with lies, tempting them into going into home ownership. But it was the moral hazard that these people would take on bad loans because they were bad people and they had to be taught to be good and to be responsible, right? Yeah. And then Jon Stewart says, so I said to him, well, why did you bail out the banks? Look what they did. And he said, well, the plane was on fire. We had to land it. So there was no moral hazard that came into bankers committing fraud, knowingly selling bad loans to poor people who they knew couldn't pay them back, or at least were extremely bad bets. But that moral standard doesn't apply to the wealthy. It only applies to the poor, to the victims of these people. So, I mean, that's where you have your problem. It's inequality of worth. I mean, these people just aren't worth anything. And you have to teach them they're betters. And that may very well be the problem for the Democrats. Calling people deplorables, calling them racist, saying they're dumb, they don't know what's good for them. A guy said, look, maybe Trump didn't do what he said he was going to do. Maybe he didn't deserve my vote, but at least he asked for it.
Yeah.
Whereas Hillary Clinton was perfectly happy to forego all those votes because they weren't worthy of voting for her. It was the fault of the voters in the end. It wasn't their fault.
How long do you think the stability, in quotation marks, that we have now will last? I mean, because obviously the first time round there was a period of semi-stability. I guess there wasn't the Second World War until, what was it, 10 years later? Yeah, 10 years later there was the start, or 9 years later. But now we've been almost 12 years since 2008. Biden's in charge. Things seem to be basic. Everyone's fine. How long will everyone... I mean, isn't there an argument to say, well, if everything's fine now, it'll be fine forever?
Well, America's been almost continuously at war since the Second World War ended. I mean, when Bush left office, there were 2 wars. Obama added 5 more to that. America is at war somewhere in the world all the time. It's moving its military machine all over the world all the time. It's surrounding China. It's surrounding Russia. It's doing all sorts of dangerous things. Only we just don't hear about those things. Trump, funnily enough, Trump didn't get us into a single new stupid war. But he was only praised by the Democrats and the press and in general, the media, when he dropped bombs. Now he's presidential. I mean, they are warmongers. Biden is a warmonger. Hillary Clinton is a warmonger. It would be remarkable if during the Biden presidency we don't get into more wars. If he can find a war, he's never seen a war he didn't like. If he can find a war, he'll get into a war. This is... So what is stability? I mean, is it stability for Americans that millions of people have lost their jobs, that we have a pandemic, that we're in lockdown? I mean, this is hardly stability. Yeah. I mean, the banks are still being bailed. I mean, during the CARES Act, which was the relief package that they passed in the United States, when all Americans got this one-off check, $5 trillion went to the top. Went to the banks, the corporations. It was the largest sort of upward movement of money in the history of mankind.
Yes, I mean, so that's what I wonder about. So where's the limit? I mean, if people just tolerate that forever, I mean, when is it going to come to, I mean, because now we've had a crisis. Well, I could ask you that. I mean, so do you think the coronavirus crisis will cause any change in, I mean, how long can it be? How has it been able to, firstly, been sustained for so long? And secondly, how long will it go on for from now?
Well,
what's going to change
it? Depends on what the problem. It depends on what you think the problem is. People now see that what the government said, what Theresa May said only a few years ago, there's no magic money tree. Well, I mean, we knew there was a magic money tree in 2008. We could see it all went to the banks. Yeah. Now there's this enormous magic money tree that keeps going on and on and on and on. The way that happens is that governments like Britain's, like the United States, they just print money. Yeah. Quantitative easing was just revving up the presses and printing money. Britain, the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, all heated up their presses and printed money and threw it around. Now, I guess the question is, when do these things come home to roost?
Yeah.
Well, for the United States, possibly it will be a very long time, because in a time like this, people look for safe places to put their money. People who have money look for safe places to put it. Even now, during this COVID crisis, people have decided that American Treasury bonds are a safe investment, and a lot more money, and that's just American debt. So they're just buying up America's debt. America never has to pay that debt. And it can just keep printing money as long as the dollar is the reserve currency of the world. Other countries are in a different position. Britain has a printing press. We're not part of the EU. We can print our own money, which is quite good. Well, we were never part of the
Eurozone, yeah.
It's part of the EU, but we're never part
Only for another month.
But we were never part of the Euro. So we always were able to set our own interest. That's what happened to Greece.
Yeah.
Also, as Yanis Varoufakis pointed out, the Germans didn't really want their money back. They just wanted to get rid of the left. They wanted to kill the left. And you see that everywhere, which is why this system will never be dismantled except by, sadly, a right-wing populist candidate. I mean, a right-wing populist movement. It will never be a movement of the left.
Yeah, why is it that people are so determined? I mean, the venom with which venom. I mean, the determination with which they went after Sanders and Corbyn. It was clear that they were two people that no one was going to allow to win any election. Neither, obviously, the Republicans would be obviously not wanting it, and the Democrats the same, for some bizarre reason. Why is it that these people are always so light on, or they never attack people like Trump to the same degree as they attack left-wing people? Why is that?
Because if Bernie Sanders had been the candidate against Donald Trump, they would all have voted for Donald Trump. Forget about the hashtag resistance, forget about the Lincoln Project and all the Republicans. Every one of those Democrats who had power, the elite, they would either have voted for Trump or they might not have voted at all, but they would never have voted for Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, why is that? Why are people so resistant to people like
Bernie
that?
Sanders is he doesn't stand for the right things. He's not a neoliberal, he's not a neoconservative. He is somebody who has the support of people, of ordinary people, of people who want things like Medicare for all in America, something like an NHS. Who want relief of debt, who want to get decent wages, who want a high minimum wage, and that want unions. They want to go back to rules that existed during, say, the time between the Second World War and the end of the gold standard in 1971. They want to have a decent standard of living, and that's something that can't be allowed.
But what's the reasons for that? And also, why is it? So is it they're not hard on Trump because they think he won't change the system? But I mean, surely one day someone will come along, like famously a Hitler. But I mean, Hitler, obviously, all these people. And it is talked about, like we're talking a lot about the Varoufakis thing. I guess it's because, I saw it recently. I mean, Trump was an individual who had nothing to offer, essentially, apart from that he was a celebrity. I mean, he had no platform ideas at all. But I mean, this fascist that I guess is going to come to power is going to give people something.
Yeah.
So, but then I guess they should be equally. I guess they will. I guess if such a candidate ever does come around, but it's a shame that it always has to be right-wing populists, and it could never be, because the reality is, I guess, like with the Roosevelt thing, is that if people allowed some sort of control of the capitalist system, the people at the top could have some wealth, or indeed, even be much wealthier than the poorest in society, but at least you wouldn't have society totally collapse, which I think would be nice.
Yeah, under Roosevelt, the top tax rate was, I think, 94%, and the wealthy were still the wealthiest people in the country, but they were taxed 94% above I don't know what it was at the time, 250,000. It was a lot more money in those days.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, they were taxed.
Yeah.
94%.
Yeah.
And they were still the wealthiest by far, and they still lived the most glamorous lifestyles, and nobody minded because everybody had a job. They were out of the Depression, and they were working, and they were living a decent life. That's not going to happen now because corporations don't pay taxes, and they don't intend to start paying taxes. They don't want their profits threatened. They don't want unions. I mean, look at the lengths. You said something about Amazon. Look at the lengths that Jeff Bezos goes to prevent people from forming unions. Walmart, they have spies that go around. If they see two workers talking together in the cafeteria, they will report it.
Yeah.
I mean, they are so intent on preventing the formation of unions.
Yeah.
We live in people now. Look at the gig economy.
Yeah.
Look at a thing like Uber. Uber is just, these people don't actually have jobs. These people are unemployed.
Yeah.
These are people who have a car, and they're kind of like using the wealth that they have collected in their car in order to invest in this career where they drive sometimes 16, 17 hours a day and still don't make a living.
Mm-hmm.
And that's absolutely